Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all for being here. It is end of October. Where has this year gone already? So want to, thank you everybody for attending. I know it's a busy time of year for a lot of people kind of going into the mid-fall project coordination and whatnot. So definitely want to make sure that your time is going to be well spent. So I'm Matt Smith. I'm going to be sort of the MC and leading us through this asset investment planning for a sustainable future webinar series that I sort of, in coordinating with the Brightly marketing team, have put on and trying to do these series kind of quarterly. Really excited today for us as we're going to be hearing from the City of Palo Alto. Specifically, Murdo Nicolson have had some awesome opportunities to work with Murdo. When I told him about this opportunity, he was excited to kind of share some of the hard work that he's been doing. And I think you're really going to understand why we're excited as we kind of jump in here. So some housekeeping items for us. First off, I want to say, we do have a Q&A, so ask questions. The session is being recorded. So if you have, if you want to share this out, you'll get an email afterwards with the recording of this. If you learned something, want to go back and review some of these golden nuggets we're going to hear from Murdo, you'll have that opportunity. But again, we'll do a Q&A at the end, but as you can see within the platform here, we encourage, if there's something that you want us to clarify or understand a little bit more as we're kind of going through this, don't hesitate to speak up. We do have Tracy with the Brightly marketing team that will kind of help ping us or let us know if we have some questions in the middle of some of these slides. So let's go ahead and jump in. I think we should start with the why we are here. And it's really important to sort of level set why we're here and why you're sort of in attendance today, because the alarming state of America's infrastructure is a C-. And as the California executive, if we dive into the California infrastructure grades, the reports back aren't as that much better. So I think this C- kind of signifies that our infrastructure is in a mediocre state, which signifies deficiencies and major growing concerns. And if we narrow that focus in, to various level of asset classes or divisions within, with our infrastructure here, you can kind of approach ways to make these improvements. And the main goal for us is, if we look at this, the best way to sort of identify and highlight some of these issues is understanding the need of investment, but then also prioritization. And really, that's going to be sort of Murdo's sort of main sort of conversation for us here coming up in a little bit. So, times are changing. The things that we've been doing in the past really have sort of been working, but really, as we've sort of signified with that C-, is where, what we're doing today wasn't working prior, and what we're doing in 20 years, may not be working, for the future here. So the main goal, I think, in looking at these initiatives passed down by the state is, these California Climate Action Plan sort of encompasses a range of initiatives and policies aimed at reducing, either greenhouse gas emissions or other sustainability, promoting renewable energy, improving overall, sustainability. And so a comprehensive approach sort of aligns with the state's commitment to addressing infrastructure issues, through innovative and environmentally conscious strategies. Obviously California at the forefront of that, City of Palo Alto today, really at the forefront of what we're going to be talking about. But, you have states saying, hey, it's time for a change. You have cities saying time for a change, council pushing this down onto facilities, public works, sustainability departments, and everyone kind of looking at each other and say, okay, we all think this is a great mission, but hey, how are we going to get there? And public works facilities, they're like, yeah, that could be a really good question. If it were something that you could just do in a year, these measures would be put in place, and they wouldn't say, hey, we have to do this by 2045 or 2030. You'd say, hey, we're going to have this done by 2024. and you've been sitting here working super hard to get a new boiler, and you've paid $250,000 for this net new boiler, but now you have this net zero initiative, and that's sort of counterintuitive to what you've been trying to work towards for these capital improvements, while also now having these sustainability goals. So you can't just throw that boiler away. So you've got to look at that boiler. What's that replacement going to be over the sort of the next 15 years, or when we're going to replace that? And so you got to have modeling to sort of manage that, not just one natural gas boiler, but look at 100 natural gas boilers, or all of your all of your natural gas assets of your sustainability initiatives, and approach them in a strategic manner. And that's exactly what Murdo has done, and sort of in this framework that we're going to walk through here called asset investment planning. And so you got these targets. How are you going to potentially get there? Kind of teeing up this framework that we look through here through the Brightly lens. And the first question is, what is asset investment planning, right? And really, it's the understanding of your capital expenditures and your operational expenditures. It's the process of identifying, prioritizing, and optimizing the investments that a city or county are making in these assets to achieve a desired outcome. And it enables organizations to make informed decisions, but also considering factors such as asset conditions, such as criticality, such as, hey, compliance and risk mitigation. But for us specifically, what I'm trying to get everyone to really understand is, you're already sort of doing these things. Why not also look through the sustainability lens as well? So analyzing that asset data, evaluating these investment options, and then developing a plan forward to help improve these communities. And obviously technology can help with that. So asset investment planning, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but how do you prioritize your investments? The scope really is you analyze, prioritize, and you optimize. What's the time horizon? It's typically a much more shorter approach to a larger goal, right? So looking at this city's example of, hey, these are our community greenhouse gas emissions. If our strategic goal is we want to be sunsetting on the state level by 2045 or 2040, what is going to be some of our short-term initiatives that we can help start checking boxes to help with the net zero initiatives. The decision-making process, it's not just one person. It's much more tactical. You're looking at investment options. You're looking at prioritizing, based on condition, based on asset life, or based on sustainability goals or other potential citywide goals. Stakeholder involvement. I think today, this is one of the things that when talking with Murdo and talking with the City of Palo Alto, that they do an excellent job of stakeholder involvement. We say, we view it as, your asset managers, your finance teams, your capital planning departments, that's who should be looking at these investments as you're making, capital improvements. And when we actually get into talking with Murdo here, you're going to kind of see why. So this is the framework. So as you're kind of thinking about, hey, Matt, asset investment planning is awesome. This sounds really cool. How should we be thinking about this? Right. So I always like to talk about, Phil Knight, triangle offense, was obviously coached with the Lakers, won a bunch of rings with a bunch of different organizations. But, think from here on out, whenever you are looking at doing asset investment planning or prioritizing, how are we going to be looking at our capital improvement processes? Think about the triangle. So at the top, you have your organizational direction. So that's coming down from city council. That's coming down from maybe a county council or city manager. The investment planning process, right? When are we going to be replacing? How much is this going to be costing us? Can we afford to be doing all of this? Do we have these resources in-house or externally? And so if you think about this example of carbon neutral by 2045 as a state initiative, sunsetting natural gas assets is an investment plan, right? This is a way that we can sort of approach just one of the many different options that we can utilize to tackle this, right? Because the age-old saying is there's multiple ways to skin a cat, so to speak, right? There could be 7 to 10 different ways that a city could approach trying to be carbon neutral. But really, a lot of that data needs to be flowing up from, your operational day-to-day operations, but then also that capital expenditures as well. And then, monitoring your asset base. And, thinking about with that triangle, what are some of those potential challenges, right? When trying to implement or understand a concept like this, what are the biggest challenges that we see within a city or a county or municipality here is first, number one is data quality, right? Like if you did a facility condition assessment, so I'm working with the city, they did a facility condition assessment back in 2019. In 2021, they did a needs assessment by their energy team, and they went in and replaced all of those assets, right? So they have all of this awesome data, but it's all kind of scattered throughout which also leads into challenge number two of organizational siloing, right? So talking back to with that stakeholder involvement, organizational siloing, what it really is everyone is thinking about sort of the lane that they're in, right? If we're going to be, the finances of all of these assets, well, that's probably living in finance, right? If we have our facility condition assessment done, that's living within facilities, right? But if by sharing this information across an organization and really sort of lowering those walls and lowering those silos, you get better involvement and better communication to make better informed decisions to help with that 5, 10-year, 20-year, multi-year, asset investment plan or capital improvement plan. Resource management, I think, in today's society with what we're dealing with, resource management, I think, is one of the biggest challenges, facing cities and communities, because resource management is looked at it as two different ways. One is, do we have the in-house staff to tackle a project like this? So yeah, this is a great project. We want to do it. Do we have the in-house staff to do it? Do we have the in-house institutional knowledge? Yes, but do we have the knowledge to make these improvements? And the answer may be no, right? And so I do think that, this is why you're seeing more and more cities and counties, working with third-party contractors and various other types of firms to bring them in-house to get that expertise, because they're saying, hey, these are our goals, we know what we need to be doing, but we don't have the bandwidth or we don't have the knowledge to do so, so we need to hire this out to give to help along these projects. And communication to stakeholders, this is one that's huge. If you're doing all this work and you're not communicating what you're doing back to your stakeholders, how do they know which direction to go? And it's also project prioritization, right? Just because something is the most important thing to your division, whether that's, hey, we need to be going and improving these streets, and this is what's most important to streets. But, if a city or county, general manager or city manager has all of these projects, how do we prioritize those to make sure that we're optimizing the funding that we do have for making improvements, but then also, could we potentially be killing two birds with one stone, so to speak? So, that being said, I'm getting ready to really get into the meat of today. Just wanted to run through, we do these webinars quarterly. This is the framework that we're looking at, the cities and the counties that we talk to. And then we're going to kind of walk through this framework, getting ready to jump in with Murdo here at the City of Palo Alto. So as we're going through these, please, think about these common challenges, because I think you're going to see Murdo just naturally doing these things and overcoming a lot of these challenges. And, and that's why he's here presenting for us today. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of turn things on. We have City of Palo Alto, and, give it on over to Murdo Nicolson here.
Hey, Matt. Thank you. Hello, everyone. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be part of this experience. It really shows a long way of where I've come from the 1990s to where I am today. Back in the day, when I was learning about environmental studies, there really wasn't anywhere that fit into what I wanted to do in life. Luckily, I came across Humboldt State University, where they allowed me to create my own degree in natural resource management with an emphasis in GIS. Oddly enough, that's basically what I do today, except I'm not doing natural resources, I'm doing asset management with GIS. To understand my background of why I've probably chosen for this position that I'm in, I have 10 plus years experience in general construction knowledge, 16 years managing street reconstruction projects that involved using green products to reduce CO2 use. I've been the infrastructure project manager since 2016, and then 23 years of GIS experience, primarily using Esri. And I was excited when my boss came to me and said, "Hey, you're in charge of writing the scope for the facility condition assessment RFP." It was a challenge. I hadn't accomplished that before, but I knew it would enable me to dive into some other topics like sustainability, which back in the day when I learned it was environmentalism. Next slide, Matt.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know where the city of Palo Alto is, it's technically the birthplace of the Silicon Valley. It's located right next door to Menlo Park. I see my neighbor is here watching this presentation. Welcome to it. The city is named after a redwood tree that still exists today in the city called El Palo Alto. And of course, the city was created by Leland Stanford, who also created Stanford University, named after him. The odd and unique specialty about the City of Palo Alto is we are a charter city where we own all of our own utilities and we purchase only carbon neutral energy and carbon offset natural gas through the grid. Not a lot of cities can say they do that. That is huge. We last did a facility condition assessment in 2009 that ended up resulting in a lot of changes in the city. It created a 2014 council adopted infrastructure plan that, well, created my position, which was nice. Provided immediate funding for capital improvements. We're still working on those. And a long-range plan for new facilities and replacement of outdated ones. Another cool fact of Palo Alto is that we are one of the few agencies in California that is APWA accredited. And some of the information required for the accreditation kind of leads into why we need to be more sustainable. And that it deals with some of the requirements that require an asset management system and infrastructure planning systems built in. And so that's part of our brand new 2023 certification that we're going back through right now. Next slide, Matt. Thanks. Yep. Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, known as the SCAP. So Palo Alto is a longtime leader in sustainability, making impressive progress towards reducing its carbon impacts, greenhouse gas, GHG emissions, and resource consumption. The Sustainability Work Group has developed diverse strategies needed to meet our sustainability goals. So with that said, my presentation today is really just going to focus only on the electrification of city-owned facilities. That's just a small part of the overall strategies being utilized to reach the city goals. Some of you may want to request this link, or we can provide it later on, but if you have any questions more about our sustainability department, here's the link right here. I'm sure we can share it later. For those of you in California, these are the emission reduction goals set by the state of California. Be 48% below 1990 levels by 2030 and carbon neutral by 2045. Palo Alto's goal is 80% below 1990 levels by 2030 and to be carbon neutral by 2030. So the city goals are almost double California's emission goals and carbon neutral goals 15 years early. That's by taking a serious deep dive into sustainability strategies. Imagine if there were more agencies in California that could match these goals. Perhaps the state of California as a whole could exceed the state mandated limits and even help out those cities that weren't able to make their goals. Right below that, you can see what our emissions were in 1990. 780,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent versus 2021, reduced it down to 359,000. So as of 2021, we had already dropped down to 54% in emission reductions, which is pretty impressive. since 2021, we have already replaced a couple other buildings, and that will make these numbers go up even further. So that brings us to part of why are we here today? You can go to the next slide, Matt.
Yeah, and Murdo, I know before I kind of jump on, I want to make sure we're giving kudos where kudos is needed. City of Palo Alto obviously has been doing a lot of really great work in carbon reductions and helping with that. And when we were making this PowerPoint presentation, Murdo had a lot of slides, and I was like, these are all awesome, but if we could put all of this maybe on one slide, because this one slide I think speaks volumes. While at the same time, the city has done so much already, and they're still wanting to go. And that's a good conversation. A good question here we have here is, how does Palo Alto define carbon neutral? Murdo, I know we were having some conversations with your sustainability director. Is this something that you feel comfortable answering, or would you maybe want to, we can, do you want to take a stab at it?
I think those questions can be answered directly from the city's website on sustainability.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a bunch of really cool things that y'all are doing. How do they define carbon neutral? There's in that link in Ori, we can make sure that we get that on over to you as well. But progress towards carbon neutrality, maybe this will help kind of answer some of that first question there.
This helps explain it. This graphic definitely helps explain it.
Yep. So yeah, power supply here, other emission sources, natural gas. And these were some of the reports and some of the information that, as you were talking with the sustainability director and let them know that you're going to be talking about specifically the city-owned building electrification processes. Sustainability director said, "Hey, these are some fun reports, or these are some fun images. Please be sure to highlight these as well." So we wanted to make sure that we, at least, got these slides in there for everybody that was potentially kind of curious.
Basically, I mean, it shows.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead here.
What I love on this slide is it really shows that because of our offsets here, we're really at 71% reduction. I mean, cities and other agencies can use future offsets or make purchase offsets to help reduce their carbon footprint as well. I don't know if a lot of agencies know that, but it's a good way to go. I did have a comment on this slide before you move ahead, is that
yeah, of course.
If we continue to purchase natural gas offsets, we will decrease our natural gas consumption decreases. Then we'll need to invest in future offsets of carbon sequestration, ways that cities can sequester carbon, can come in green concrete, other ways, other things that cities can do to sequester carbon. When they do construction projects within their city, they can take carbon and sequester it into building materials. They can use recycled products, so you're reducing other carbon items coming into your community. Primarily, we need to reduce natural gas use in on-road transportation. It's really what these slides are telling us. Next slide. So this really kind of sums up, showing from 1990 and then 3 years in a row, 2019, 2020, and 2021, where we had measurable and quantifiable information that was put into this. 1990, everyone was using brown power supply for electricity. Between 1990, about the same time I was studying environmentalism at Humboldt State, to 2019, someone in the city, they decided, well, we don't need to buy brown power anymore. And everything switched over to their new purchases off the grid that they make. And it's crazy because the solid waste reduction in emissions is huge. It dropped from 1990 to where it is. I don't even see the line in 2019. Most of that probably had to do with the removal of the incinerator at our water quality control plant. So reiterating this slide, no brown power supply. Solid waste emissions were basically eliminated. Just want to reiterate that. The cool thing is you can see our target goal, where it actually is on this list. It's that dashed line by 8030 to get to 156,000 metric tons. We're getting pretty close, but we still need to work hard to get to where we are. Next slide. Why electrify? So as highlighted on the slide, you can see that blue area for natural gas use. It's within that small area that this electrification assessment we're going to talk about is involved in, removing natural gas use from those buildings and city-owned facilities within that category. Of course, residential and commercial buildings also fit within that category as well. But we're going to focus only on city-owned buildings today. Why? Well, buildings become more comfortable. It's less maintenance, lower operating costs, and most importantly, it's emission-free. Did you have any comments on this slide, Matt?
Yeah, I was going to say, when we were presenting these slides as well, and the reason we put this little circle is, this is where this project fits in. And when talking with cities and when talking with counties, there's multiple different projects you can be doing, right? And it's the whole goal with just showing is like, there's a lot of different ways that we can, decrease this, we can decrease natural gas, use or future emissions, but how does this one project help with that larger goal, right? And so when looking at it through the asset investment planning lens, this is a more tactical approach of, hey, yes, there's 100 different things we could be doing, but hey, this is something, we needed a facility condition assessment because the old one, was outdated. That data wasn't great. We're essentially killing two birds with one stone because these were things that the city needed to be doing, while also saying, hey, this is our goal of 2030, and this project can tie in with those goals as well. So, I think when you were explaining this whole process to me, this image really hit home for me of saying, okay, it's just this little sliver within all of this blue. There are other things in this blue that, we're going to be trying to tackle, but this helps bring that blue down just a little bit. And it's those incremental changes and those incremental little improvements that, are helping, I think, the city of Palo Alto, and also thinking about it's like you're not having to eat the elephant, so to speak, with just one bite. It's a bunch of small little bites here.
Next slide.
Yep.
How did the EA get started? Or how did the topic of an electrification assessment get started? Well, basically, the conceptual discussion for an electrification assessment was conceived during early scope design for the 2021 facility condition assessment. While I was researching scopes of work for facility condition assessments, I realized other agencies were doing assessment. So some of these topics that I want to do more research on, and I think scope, doing a full level ASHRAE energy audit, doing deep retrofit assessments to include solar at all facilities when they are electrified, along with high energy efficiency upgrades, capital planning software to forecast the results of the FCA 30 years forward to put funding in place at the right time, asset tagging all of maintainable equipment in our CMS system, an electrification assessment, analytics beyond just an FCI, but an F&I index, facility needs index, where electrification costs are included in the index scores. After weeks of online research, conceptual meetings with the individual staff, I created a working draft scope that included everything I just mentioned. Now, before moving on, funding is always a challenge if not identified early on when you have a true scope. The draft I considered was the Porsche of all FCAs. We cleaned it up, but we had to reduce the scope to meet our funding level. Next slide, please.
I'm going to unpack that. You, I'm going to ask you some questions here. I'm going to do it.
Okay.
So let you
I knew
know.
you would.
I, so you basically create a Christmas list, right? You know,
Yes.
hey, I'm a kid. This is everything I want to make the city better. And then you have your parents come in and say, look, we don't have enough money to get you all the toys that you want, right? So,
That hits the
funding.
nail on the head. That's perfect.
Exactly.
Yes.
So funding is always a challenge, I think, for any city, right? You can get federal grants, you can you can go out and apply for things. You can maybe move. So you say, hey, this project falls under this purview. We can maybe pull some money from here. We can pull some money from there. So at the end of the day, you didn't have enough funding. And how did you then go back? So you built this Porsche of a list, as you had mentioned. How did you decide where to cut? Right? Like, how did you then say, hey, we can't afford a Porsche, but you know what? A Toyota Prius is pretty good, right? Like, how did you decide to kind of bring this down? What did you cut? Why did you cut it? Maybe explain that a little bit further, as to the audience here.
We might kind of address that a little further down in the presentation when we're talking to the stakeholders group, because
Yep.
it
Yeah.
really had everything to do with the stakeholders. But get everyone's wish list of what would be the best possible project to go out with, put everything in your scope, and then put in a draft and bring it to your stakeholders to discuss and go through it and look at your funding sources. We realized eventually that all these would be awesome things to include if you have it in the original scope of work. So some agencies are different, but sometimes when you create a funding source, you may not have identified the true scope of the project. And so in this case, I believe all we had was facility condition assessment in our original scope of work. So adding in all these other things, there was no funding source for them because they really aren't a facility condition assessment. These are other things you can do at the same time you're having a facility condition assessment done. So when you're going to identify a capital improvement project early on, make sure you put all these other things in so you can have them as part of your project or remove them if you don't want them, or it can be done separately down the road. So we didn't have that funding silo to include any of these items. But as we get further down in the presentation, you'll see how members of the stakeholder came forward to help out with two items on this list, more specifically, yep, the electrification assessment and the capital planning software portion.
Awesome. So you got your list, you've built out your scope. Walk us through just the steps here, right?
This is Murdo's steps for a successful RFP.
It's beautiful. It's a great visual for people like me that needs a simple boom, 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 boom.
Stakeholder engagement. It all begins with stakeholder engagement. Definitely the most important part of any RFP, CIP, or IFB. When you're at the stakeholder group, discuss your successes and downfalls of the previous FCA, develop new goals and objectives, identify roadblocks to success, and draft a scope and obtain buy-in by leadership that people need to approve your final scope before you can hit the market.
Can I ask, I think buy-in from leadership is one. How do you get maybe someone that may not be as fluent as yourself or somebody else? How do you, like, what in your opinion, sort of the best way to kind of get buy-in leadership? What are some of the examples there, or things that you have done, or maybe around this project, to get buy-in from leadership?
I don't think I had to do anything. I think the sustainability department created the buy-in prior to me going out to bid with adding these other items. But having your seniors in your department and the other departments involved, in my case, the Director of Public Works, utilities folks, and the sustainability director, having those people involved in critiquing and finalizing what you have in your project can really help fine-tune. Education, if your city is big on sustainability, they're going to fit right into this. So you need to get buy-in from the top all the way down. Residents, council, directors. senior staff. And this project just fell into place. It was like a natural falling into place in the city of Palo Alto. It's what everyone wants.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we need.
So let's jump into that sort of that first top so CIP stakeholder group. That's a lot of names, right? I mean, these are a lot of divisions.
Small.
Yeah.
First, I just started off with just me and one or two other people in public works engineering. Then I'm like, wait a minute, I should probably bring in the people who are in charge of maintaining the buildings, people who have manage the staff who does all the maintenance and operations at facilities. They do some of their own capital replacements. Bring in the senior building engineer who does CIP replacement through the engineering department. Of course, bring in the sustainability manager because they know the most about what we're talking about here. And dealing with capturing energy usage, therms, and kilowatt hours, definitely had to go out to the utilities, commercial accounts manager. And we talked with one of the power engineers who could run queries on calculate therms, and we had to do some crazy quantification through them to see what building used how many therms. And then, of course, getting IT involved as well, because we wanted to use the software, potentially use the software. And so you have to get your IT involved to bring in a software to the city. And once you get everyone meeting together, everyone is talking about it, yeah, it's a great way to go. Get other people involved. The larger your stakeholder group, the better off you'll be, because you'll get everyone's opinions. Some people have ideas you may not have ever considered. And that's what happened with this work group.
So age-old saying of, too many chefs in a kitchen, right? This is sort of counteracting that concept, right? Of, hey, rather than thinking if we loop in too many people, this project may not happen. It's actually, in your case, the opposite, right? Of, hey, we need to understand therms. We need to go talk to utilities. In order we want to be able to manage this, we need in some type of software. We need to talk to IT. So looping them so they understand the project, and as we had talked about earlier in some of those challenges, one of the biggest challenge with asset investment planning is organizational siloing. Look at all of these organizations that we are staring at right now. Look at all of these divisions that have that understand what is needed to within the subset of this larger project to make sure that, hey, if you go and tinker over in facilities, this is how it could potentially mess with utilities, right? So making sure that everybody's on the same page, and this is what we're going to be doing, and this is what we're looking for. And I know, it's the whole kumbaya sort of concept here, but when you were explaining this to me, I was like, this is one of my other favorite things about this project is not only like seeing, hey, this is part of a larger whole, but the amount of people that this project touched and oversaw really goes to show what's possible. And I do think a lot of cities and counties that I talk to, they get either scared or there's, hey, we've tried doing something like this before. But hey, how is this all going to benefit them? And what is this going to essentially be utilizing, or the goal that we're going to accomplish with? So, kind of going back to Murdo's successful steps to an RFP in a fun Matt version, so he really understands how to process all of this information. So we just saw in that previous slide your stakeholder involvement. Let's now talk about sort of some of those other processes here, and maybe not such a visually friendly representation here, but at least you can kind of see, the process as a whole, everything that sort of went into it before we even launched the FCA to go to a firm. So unpack this for us a little bit, if you don't mind, Murdo.
Yeah, this is all the information that we started compiling and putting together. It didn't happen in one meeting, but over multiple meetings over a couple of months. And this helped define the exact scope of the project. And I mean, our last facility condition assessment was done in 2009. And right off the bat, what were the successes of it? It led to new capital funds. It had council buy-in, created my position, right? It funded the CMMS. But some of the challenges, though, of the 2009 FCA, it was basically just a static snapshot in time report. When you get a paper facility condition assessment, it's only as good as that moment that the project is printed on paper. It doesn't live or breathe, especially if it's not in a software that can take updates when a facility gets replaced and electrified. Now those pieces of equipment are no longer on the electrification list. Now they're part of just the replacement list and maintenance list, separated. The data was not utilized in the CMMS right off the bat. No electrification assessment was included in it. It wasn't until 2016, after my position was created, that we brought in the CMMS, basically where we added in almost every asset in the city in the right of way, and buildings, parks, parking lots, you name it. That's basically a whole nother discussion I need to have, or webinar. So as we decided to move towards what are the new goals and objectives for our FCI? What did we want to accomplish? What are some metrics that we need to provide? How can we create visuals to provide staff or council? A typical facility condition assessment just has a facility condition index, which is basically deferred maintenance divided by the replacement cost. Okay, that gives you a nice number. You can plot it out and see how one building compares to another, or you can go in and see, well, how are all of our libraries? How are all of our fire stations? In our case, we wanted to also potentially track and see how facility condition indexes are at an asset hierarchy level, like how are all of our fire station electrical systems or plumbing systems? So you can look at individual systems. Facility condition needs. So for us, this was a good one. Facility condition needs, you basically are adding in your deferred maintenance, your CIP replacements, an electrification assessment divided by its replacement cost. So you're looking at a whole nother ballgame, but you really can't compare the buildings that aren't going to be electrified. So you almost have a separate report just for all the electrified buildings, or the buildings that are candidates for electrification. You also have an extended facility condition index, which is just another way of looking at the FCI. We wanted to see 30-year cost projections. What's 5 years, 10 years? But knowing 30 years down the road, you're going to be able to track assets by type or hierarchy. You're going to be able to see all your recurring assets, a roof every 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. Your boilers are being replaced every 20 years. They'll all be on that kind of forward-going thing or calculation. But the electrification assessment, what do we want to calculate? Well, first, we need to know how many total therms we're using in a year to city facility assets. We needed to find out how many therms is each building actually using, so we can detail and find that list of, well, not every building has gas. Okay. Out of 140 something buildings, I think only 42 or 40 something buildings have gas in them. And we wanted to know, what is the replacement schedule of those assets based on the remaining useful lifespan? We wanted to make sure we could put this data into a CIP or a capital planning, capital investment software. And of course, want to link this data through open API, link our facility condition assessment, electrification assessment with our CMS, and all put it into Esri. That way you can look at everything in the grand picture. And once everything's linked and integrated, you can run visuals in Esri from data from the FCA, or visuals in Esri from the electrical assessment, and all that information can be shared together. But of course, at the stakeholders meeting, we also had to identify the roadblocks to success. There were no funds for electrification assessment or CIP software. They just weren't created in the original scope, like I mentioned earlier. So got back together, stakeholder engagement came back together again, and utilities came forward and helped fund the electrification assessment. IT came in and funded the CIP software. So that your kumbaya experience right there, by having that, it brought everyone back together. Otherwise, we would have just had a plain old FCA. And of course, there were other things that we did have in the project, like asset tagging. If there's already someone there looking at the asset and inspecting and quantifying a maintainable piece of equipment, doesn't cost much more to have someone slap a barcode on it so it can be linked to your CMS system simultaneously at the same time. Take care of it while they're assessing it. You think I covered everything there, Matt?
I think you did a great job. Two things I'm going to note. One is, again, stakeholder involvement. I know we keep hitting that, but like you said it just there, we would have just had an FCA. Well, in 2009, you had an FCA, right? You would just be right back where you were in 2023 if without that stakeholder involvement, with utilities helping you fund the electrification assessment. Without IT understanding why this project is important, they step up and say, "Hey, we're gonna fund the CIP software." Right. And now I'm not saying every IT or every utilities department is going to go and fund all the projects that, the audience wants to have, but it's making them aware of what our goals are, what the projects are, and this is why it's important, not only to the city, but also, to the communities around us. And that's honestly, this is exactly why we have you sharing this presentation. It's like, if you have issues funding things, go ask for help. Right. So this gets into, okay, you built your scope, you went through all these processes, you understand the funding sources, and now you put the RFP out to the street, right? You send it out there, you say, here are our goals, here's our blueprint, walk us through this if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, we're just going to focus on the electrification assessment here, because the FCA assessment requirements are multiple pages longer than the EA.
Yeah.
Because the focus was on the FCA. This is just our bonus. Mm-hmm. So the goals of the electrification assessment reports show that the pathway to reach an 80% reduction of emissions by 2030, or the pathway for a 40% reduction of emissions by 2030, 80% by 2040. And some of the reasons why you would need to do that is because of remaining useful lives. If you have a boiler that was installed in 2000 and has a 30-year life cycle, it won't be available to be replaced until 2030 or beyond if you've had maintenance and other work done to it. So lifespans of assets are going to exist between 2030 and 2040, no matter what we do. And it brings you to a tough point. I mean, are you going to electrify all your assets in a building at one time? Or are you going to do it when it makes the most sense, and that's replace them when the remaining useful life expires? So those are some items that people need to consider. On the right here, it just shows a snapshot of where we were when we started this RFP process. We had 142 buildings across the city that we managed, totaling 2 million square feet. Since then, we've built in a couple new buildings, a brand new parking garage, and we have a brand new police building underway. Brings up to 144 buildings to 2.6 million square feet. 47 buildings with greenhouse gas burning equipment. And in 2021, we were at 565,000 annual therms of use. So that is that small blue area on that chart we saw way back there at the beginning of the presentation. That's what we're focusing these numbers on. We want to remove this 565,000 annual therms through electrification.
So you put out this RFP. Did you get a lot of bids on the project? Or was there just like one that was like, yeah, this sounds awesome? Or were there a lot of people? Because I'm sure whenever RFP's out, I feel like there's always a lot of bids that come in.
Good question. Well, personally, when I managed street resurfacing projects for years,
yes,
you knew it was a good bid or good project if you had a lot of submittals or bid submittals, right? So after a thorough evaluation, we decided to look, and we had 8 submittals. I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty good. Yeah.
So
how did you figure out which? How did you
you
figure out to make the, hey, of the 8, how did you whittle it down to 1, so to speak?
most agencies have an RFP requirement and grading requirements, and you assign certain members of staff or stakeholders. Stakeholders are involved again here, to come in and score based off of pre-selected criteria on the projects. And we went through the list and we narrowed down 3 finalists who had to come in and give a hands-on presentation to us in person. And then those 3 finalists were hand selected and narrowed down with additional scoring, and we ended up choosing Bureau Veritas in the end.
Yeah. Yep. Wonderful. So go out. They do the assessment. You get this data back, and now let's talk about your infrastructure management system. Right?
Yes,
so you get all this data, right? Where is this data now going to go, Murdo? Explain this all to us. And I will say, we are a Brightly podcast, or we are a Brightly webinar here, and having maintenance connection as the CMMS. Murdo and I joke about this, but I said, hey, look, man, this is meant for you to tell your story, and I understand that you're utilizing maintenance connection, and that personally, whatever's working for you and helping your processes, that's great. I will say that Brightly does have their own asset management system, and as a Brightly webinar, I should make that note. But for all the work that you're doing, excited that you're able to get that within maintenance connection there. But unpack all of this for us and tell us why a CMMS, CIP, and GIS system and housing all of this data is important.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. To me, thank you for allowing me to share these slides and who we're using. I think it's important to know that there's not one fit all system here, and that all these systems can interact with each other in some way. And some people may use one software company that provides all these lines of software development for an agency or a city to use. In our case, it just went in this order. We started using maintenance connection back in 2009, just on our city buildings, for facilities maintenance. And that really is the bulk of where my job was created in 2016 as an infrastructure project manager. And in there now, pretty much every asset that we maintain and own in the right of way is also in there, where we're tracking costs, capital replacement, preventative maintenance costs across these assets all the way across the board. But there's no capital projection in maintenance connection. It's really for tracking costs that occur as they come along and they get stacked away and build up, so you can run reports on how much have we spent. Where the Brightly software comes in with Predictor is it allows us to see 30 years into the future. How much money do we need to spend? How much money do we need to put aside based off of inflationary, your local costs? Some places cost more. So it allows us to project our capital cost planning. We're maximizing remaining useful life cycles, decreasing our low total cost of ownership of assets. So to me, an infrastructure management system needs to involve all these things together. And everything here is a requirement of being an accredited agency through APWA. You need to be able to have inventory, which is basically done through maintenance connection. You need to have capital planning and planning investment software or some sort of planning device. This is Brightly. And then how do you map it out? Well, we're going to use Esri. We're slowly in the process of converting all of our existing GIS information in line work and data points and metadata behind the polygon and topology into Esri. So eventually we'd love to have all of these melded together. It's like the melting pot for the perfect infrastructure management system.
And again, when we started talking, going back to our original slides of what we believe here at Brightly with asset investment planning, that triangle, at the base of that triangle is 2 major boxes to truly understand your total cost of ownership. And leveraging software to help manage that is in your CMMS and your CIP software. So the actual software in your case is maintenance connection and Brightly. And so whatever that formula looks like, every city, just like all your building infrastructure, you have, different companies with different, different assets inside in them, so to speak. So I just, again, just really, when we started talking, I thought I love the fact that the more we unpacked your project and more we unpacked is this aligns with this whole concept here. And this, I know we're coming close on time, and this is I think the most important slide for us today. And I apologize that we're going to have to not necessarily cut it short, but I think this is what a lot of cities and counties struggle with, is prioritization and communication to stakeholders. So, not to kind of steal your thunder here, but when Murdo was talking to me, he had this one slide, and it was literally just, if you look in the bottom left here, it was these facilities with electrification difficulties. And I think a lot of them, a lot of cities and counties probably have this exact same challenge. And he's like, these are going to be a problem for us. And I think that that's a sticky conversation that can be a little bit unsettling when trying to communicate to stakeholders. And so go ahead and unpack this for us a little bit more, if you don't mind, Murdo. And, for those that have to jump, apologize. We'll kind of keep going here, but I definitely want to make sure we give the breadth that, this topic right here needs to unpack.
Yeah, it's really important to know up front from your in-house staff and your in-house crews. In this case, it came from members of our stakeholders group who have on-hands knowledge of these facilities. They know what kind of equipment is there. And so even though a facility condition assessment is typically a visual assessment of assets, in our case, we use ASTM Uniform at 2 standards. Using technology like Brightly's predictor allows you to leverage for a better analysis and cost calculating by involving the information that in-house crews and staff know only about that facility, that someone couldn't know that knowledge from just a simple visual assessment. So for example, when you do a visual assessment of a roof, you're just going to calculate what type of roof it is. You can't see the structure underneath it. So only an in-house crew would know, oh, we need to replace 30% of the structural support for this roof. So that's where you can leverage technology, and you can put in customized cost for that building and for that roofing replacement. Or in this case, an electrification assessment, if you know the new electrified equipment, there's no structural support in the roof or where it needs to be installed, you need to go in and create a custom scenario and leverage the technology so your cost for that location of a new heat pump or electrified piece of equipment, now the cost is not just the piece of equipment and the conduit and the circuit panel update, but now you have to put in a specialized cost for how much structural additions do you need to make at that asset location. So to me, that's really where the electrification can gain a better insight by leveraging technology through customizations within the software. I mean, if it was on a piece of paper, we could say, oh, this boiler is going to cost XYZ dollars, but it doesn't take into account any of the known issues that are associated with that location. And so in our case, we knew we had structural issues with placement of new assets. We knew we had buildings from the 1930s with poor energy efficiency. Kind of leaks back to maybe a deep retrofit may have been better in some places. If you're going to convert to electrification, maybe you should do electrical efficiency at the unit as well, the facility as well. And if you electrify an entire building at one time, is the panel large enough to support electrification? You might even go one step above the panel. Is the switchgear to that facility or building location or campus sufficient enough? Do you need to install a new transformer out on the street to bring that power in to that facility? And some of the buildings are older and they might be close to functionally obsolete. Does it truly make sense to electrify those buildings, or are they up for replacement? So the city is going to have some really tough choices to make in the very near future. Are we going to electrify entire buildings at one time, or we're going to electrify one-off assets based on remaining useful life. Thank you, Matt. That's basically all I got today.
No, and I was going to say, I think, it goes back to challenge number 5 with project prioritization, right? And communication to stakeholders of, hey, if we run this scenario where we electrify all of the buildings, building by building, this is what it's going to cost us. This is what's going to happen. If we decide to go and do, this scenario, right? So giving the communication, as you had mentioned, kind of going up and, as you were saying, buy-in from leadership is equipping them, I think, with information. And as you kind of said, there's these choices aren't easy, right? There's all these different ways that you can go about this. And it's, hey, if we run this scenario, what's going to happen? Is this going to break our budget? Is this going to be something we can manage or not? And vice versa. If we go this way, hey, maybe we can afford it, but, maybe we don't have the resources to do this, right? So then we're going to have to outsource something. You know what I mean? So it's thinking about things, and it's presenting the information in a way in which your stakeholders and leadership and everybody will understand. And that's why on this one slide, I thought it was just really powerful, because I think every city deals with this. Is like, you have these handful of buildings that, for whatever reason, are going to be a problem. And the only way that you can, essentially move forward with that problem is, you're going to have to be spending money on it, and how much money, and if we do this, is it going to cost us more? But that useful life may expand, right? Or, hey, we're throwing useful life out the window on 2 of these buildings, but we're going to keep it for 3 of them. What's that going to cost us? What's that going to look like? And playing those kind of what if scenarios. It's just, I'm really excited, and thank you so much, Murdo, for sharing. Some takeaways, sustainable asset investment planning, design principles, stakeholder buy-in at the beginning of the project is key. Focus on what's feasible, prioritize what's within the city's control, lead by example, right? Hey, we did city-owned buildings for this project because that's what's in your control, and you are leading by example to hope that other divisions, residential, commercial, whatever, are going to follow, right? Specify near-term goals, costs, keeping up with long-term goals, as an aspiration. Hey, part of this project was 30 years. We wanted to identify this for 30 years, but hey, near-term goals, what's this going to cost us by 2030, right? Consider, total cost of accounting. As you had mentioned, replacing the roof is going to this, but replacing the structure is going to be an additional cost. Aligning these incentives to encourage desired outcomes and discourage undesirable ones. Implement flexible platforms, and so you can expand, future capacity. In conclusion, I think we just kind of walked through it, but, climate change has an impact that's driving, asset management. That's why we're here. I'm not going to necessarily read all of these, but storytelling as a predictive analytics, helps engage those decision makers. Coming with a plan and being able to explain said plan, it got you this project greenlit, it got it funded by multiple different stakeholders, multiple different divisions, and now it's giving you the data and the analytics to provide more insights so you can make better decisions, for the city of Palo Alto. Questions? I know we're 4 minutes over, so sorry, everybody. Any questions that you might have, I know if you need to jump, if you need to run, totally understand that. Again, you'll get a recording of this.
There is one question.
Yeah. How does define carbon neutral? I think we kind of sort of tackled that with the slide.
I would just say, Ori, why don't you reach out to me? I mean, our offices are 5 minutes apart. I can definitely put you in contact with the sustainability director, who could provide you in detail information about how we define carbon neutral. I don't want to step on anyone's toes or get it wrong.
Yeah. And Ori, I'm happy to also make that introduction, as they're also clients. But I think we've gone over, so I don't want to keep us here, but want to thank Murdo again. Thank everybody for attending. And I guess have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Brightly.